You're listening to Big Blend Radio's Lost Angel Travel Adventures show with Linda Ballou, travel writer and author, and your host, Lisa Smith. Hey, everybody, it is time for another Lost Angel travel adventure. And this time we're going to talk about the devil. We're going to Tasmania with Linda Ballou. And this story is featured in her Lost Angel Unleashed book, Stories from the Heart. And you can go get it if you go to lostangeladventures.com and also lindaballauthor.com. So welcome back, Linda. We're kind of going down under, right? Can you say that for Tasmania?
That's right. Absolutely. Tasmania is a part of Australia, and it's even further down under than the main Australia continent.
Mm. I remember when you went to Australia and Tasmania, it was right, you like got home right before the shutdown for COVID,
Right.
right?
Exactly. Yeah, I was so fortunate to get down under. Big on my bucket list, and I got to go all around the main continent, but on a tour with Overseas Adventure Travel. But then I took a week on my own to go to Tasmania because I had heard so much about it being a wonderful for outdoor adventure. And that's what it is. It's just absolutely fabulous if you're an outdoors person and you love to hike. Or you have water sports there, but I have to say the waters, the Tasman Sea is a little chilly, but the Tasmanians swim in it and surf in it and so on. But Tasmania once was a part of the main continent, and 12,000 years, there was a land path between Tasmania and the main continent. And 12,000 years ago, there was a sea level rise, like what we're experiencing now. Guess what? And
Yeah.
it rose up and it covered the walkway that the Australians had used. So the Tasmanians in Tasmania were isolated for 12,000 years from the main continent. So they
Wow.
evolved on their own differently. And
Mm.
there were 4,000 Tasmanian Aboriginal people living on the island, which is about as big as Ireland, by the way, when the British landed. And they had different. They didn't have the tools. They weren't as developed as the people on the main continent. They only had one tool, one weapon, which was a spear, and they had very few tools. But they were peaceful, loving
Mm.
people, and lived happily there for about 12,000 years until the British
Wow.
came. Yeah.
Oh, now, so when the British came, I know in people famously talk about, okay, then there's the Captain Cook and all that. Oh boy, there's all kinds of, like every country, we have some crazy history and continents, but I know the British famously said, here's a bunch of criminals and dump them out there.
Right.
So did that happen in Tasmania too?
Absolutely. In fact, the Port Arthur uh, port and little harbor is where the most horrible penal colony was established.
Oh,
And the worst of the worst were sent there. Offenders in the Australian penal colony, if you can imagine. The people who, it really is a tragic tale, though, because a lot of the quote unquote convicts were people who had like stolen a piece of bread or
right.
someone stole a handkerchief, and they didn't have enough prisons to, to accommodate all of these criminals.
Oh,
And
so-called
so
criminals. Yeah.
they sent them off to colonize Australia. And the penal code, the convict thing was just hideous. The people were treated hideously, flogged and beaten. And
Mm.
they had one, they felt they were, after it got horrible for so long, they decided to reform their system. And they started giving the people less or more food, like you would a dog as you're training it, to
Mm.
do what they wanted.
Ooh.
And what they wanted them to do was build things, and they built, buildings all over Tasmania. But the interesting thing is that the worst of the worst people started this place, but the people who live there now are like the best of the best. I mean, they're like the sweetest people on the planet, so accommodating, so generous, so giving, and
Mm.
so environmentally conscious.
Ooh,
They are preserving their little corner of the world. Over 40% of Tasmania is a national park.
that's
And
amazing.
there's only like a half a million people living on it all year round.
Mm. Well,
So
and you even say in your article, not your article, but in your book, your story, you talk about don't drive at night because there are things, I mean, it seems like it's so wild out there in a way that they're coexisting with nature, is it what it seems like
really,
from reading.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, it's really a friendly country on the way to Cradle Mountain, which is their equivalent of our Sierra Mountains, only not nearly as high, maybe about 6,000 feet instead of 12,000
Mm.
feet. So that was also one of the beauties of the place is that even on they have all these outdoor tracks. They have 880 miles of trails on this not very big island, right? And but it's a strange, it's incongruous because the British then, after the penal colony business was going on, years later, the British gave land grants to landed gentry in
Mm.
England. So kind of like our homesteading that we did here in America when they told the settlers, go west, you can, if you live here, you can have the land. And so some of the landed gentry came and gentrified the place. So it has a very English feel, it's very civilized, with pastures, with sheep, and
Wow.
sweet little villages that remind you very much of the mother country.
Wow.
uh, but the difference is that it's framed in rugged mountains and so on. So I just want to read you this little piece
Mm.
about the countryside. Okay, the country, and I'm on my way to Cradle Mountain here. The country lane soon turned into a corkscrew affair that spiraled upward through mountains sheathed in thick forest. No one had mentioned to me that Tasmania is one of the most mountainous islands in the world. Accidents on the narrow lanes are common. You are advised not to drive after dusk, as that is when the wombats, wallabies, and patamelons come out to graze, causing accidents as people swerve to miss them. All this is added to the drama of driving on the other side of the road. They're English. The good news is there was little traffic, and I had the roller coaster ride through gorgeous country to myself. Cradle Mountain National Park is home to the highest peaks in Tasmania with wild, unpredictable weather. And even though it was raining the day I arrived, I attempted to hike the 4-mile Dove Lake Circuit. The trailhead is also where the challenging 6-day overland track begins. Sheets of water shut out the view of the mountains framing the lake and forced me to turn back. I was, however, able to enjoy enchanted woods track in the gloom of a haunting forest ensconced in moss and algae to Kinvet Falls. So that's the way the place is. It's a little daunting to get. I mean, after a week of driving on these roads, I was really ready to turn my rental car in. I really wish I had given myself 2 weeks at least to explore. And if you're going down that far, I mean, you take a flight it's a domestic flight from Sydney, or you can take this ferry that's a 9-hour thing that it's pretty rough. I mean, the seas out down this way
Mm.
can get pretty daunting. So I wouldn't recommend the ferry, but the
Especially if you
flight,
get seasick. Yeah.
and people do, they get sick.
Mm.
And so the flight is a piece of cake, and I love the simplicity of the place. Hobart is a small town, it's the major town. You could just spend a week in the Hobart area exploring things that are day trips
Mm.
from Hobart. You can go to Port Arthur. You can go to where I did on the first day, which is the track that follows the cliffs that are behind me. And this is a
It's
wonderful
rugged.
coastal walk. And along this coastal walk, which is very few hikers on it, maybe, a couple here and there, it's very safe. I would say all of Tasmania is very safe, and clean. And that it's just like, such a nice little place, corner of the world,
Huh.
honestly. So I saw little wallabies, which are like little miniature kangaroos, sleeping on the side of the trail. And of
Oh,
course,
cool.
waterfalls. Yeah, this is called, waterfalls and lots of wildflowers. Of course, you want to go down there in our winter. Their winter is our summer. And they
I want
do,
to go anywhere in winter that's got sun.
yeah, really. It's been a rough one. I know, Lisa, you've had a tough time out there in the world this year with all of this bizarre weather we're having. But I think the bizarre weather is going to continue.
Hmm. Well, you
At
have to
any
be
rate,
prepared for it. And that kind of
yeah,
place, I think, is used to this fluctuation. Like, Colorado's like that very much, right? You've been to Colorado quite a bit where they
yeah,
say wear layers. I've been in like 80 degrees and all of a sudden down to 30 in
right.
one day.
It's very mercurial in Colorado, largely because of the altitude. As you're going, like Denver's at a mile high, right? The mile high city, that's around 6,000. But you in an hour's drive, you're up at 9,000, and
Mm,
so you're adjusting, acclimating all the time. And of course, in the mountains have their own weather; they create their
mm.
own weather. So, but this area here is more rainy than snowy,
Okay.
but it does snow up there in Cradle Mountain, and
Wow.
they do get some weather here. So I'm saying, if you do make that very long journey, make certain you're going in a time of year when you can enjoy the outdoor tracks. There is a 5-day coastal walk on this area in this area here, which is quite beautiful. And I really wished I I could have done it. It's like a hut to hut 5-day track.
That
Some
would be
of it you
cool.
have, yeah, some of it you have to be camping out, but lots of fun outdoor activities there. So Cradle Mountain is the most famous, and the track that I mentioned there is, a lot of people come from around the world to do those two main tracks, the coastal track and the Cradle Mountain.
Mm.
But if you go over to the East Bay to Freycinet, then you're all on the coast, and you have all of these really charming coastal villages, really sweet,
Mm.
miles and miles of white sand beaches that you can stroll upon. And I did Airbnb things there, which were all great, really reasonable, under $100. I don't think I spent more than $100 for any of the Airbnbs I stayed at. And the one in a show, which was just a half a block to the beach, was called the Wheelhouse, and it was so sweet and charming, and gardens everywhere. They love
Ooh.
flowers, and there's,
Ooh.
it's how the English have their gardens, right? Well,
Yeah.
it's sweet like that. And so I walked to the beach, and there was a blowhole there that was a tourist attraction, and they had little arrows along these orange colored rocks. There's an algae down there that colors the rocks
Ooh.
orange,
Ooh,
all
neat.
along what they call the Freycinet coast. And so I followed these arrows like breadcrumbs to the witch's cottage. And it was so fun. Yeah, it was great. It was like this little secret path. And it ended me up in the marina, small little marina, where there was a glass boat tour, which I took.
Oh, I
Yeah,
love.
yeah. So you could see the local sea life. And I was informed that a lot of the kelp and some of the starfish and things that you would normally see there were not there because of global warming, because there was a
Oh,
warm
wow.
current coming from, yeah. So all over the world, global warming is affecting the Great Barrier Reef. And
Mm.
there apparently is a warm current that comes down from the main continent that is killing their sea life, which is unfortunate.
Oh.
But nonetheless, very sweet little ride on the boat. I mean, not a big deal, just sweet, just relaxing, nice guide sharing history and such. And then I had a delicious bowl of seafood bouillabaisse. It was like really good. And I really had a nice time. Just walking about, running into things. It was very easy to explore and have a very pleasant time,
Mm.
which coming from the big city of LA and dealing with the traffic and the crowds everywhere. I mean, it's such a pleasure to
Mm.
be in a relaxed environment, where you can just stroll along and stumble into things.
It seems very idyllic. Did you meet very many international tourists there, or were there mostly locals from Australia? Because
I was
it,
traveling on my own, so I stayed with a local family in Launceston, which is the second largest town there, which isn't big, but it's famous about this. There's a gorge there, beautiful, beautiful, dramatic gorge with a suspension bridge over it, and they were long term had born. I think they were born. One the wife I think was born there, but anyway, once again, so pleasant, so extending. They took me out to dinner at the gorge. They wanted to show off their little town, which
yeah.
was, with the Victorian homes. Once again, very clean and very charming.
Mm.
So I wasn't really talking to a lot of people because when I was traveling there, I was traveling alone. I was in
Mm.
kind of a hurry because I only had a week. Um, I stayed at the Wombat Lodge in Cradle Lake, which was so cute. It was really cute. It was like so rustic and sweet. And when I landed there, I went, "Where am I? My God, there's no town. There's no nothing. And I started to walk around, and it was like the only establishment aside from this kind of a resort place. So I went in there, and they were actually having a wedding there, and it was really quite fun. It was a big party.
Oh, cool.
Those were all local people. No, I didn't meet a lot of international
Mm.
travelers, but then I wasn't chatting a lot with everyone. I
But
was
just, well, I think you can kind of tell when there's a lot of, even if you're not talking to them, it just seems that, how often do you hear of people going to Tasmania is kind of where I was going with that,
well,
because I think people will go to Australia, but Tasmania
right.
sometimes just kind of gets left off as this, oh, the devil's there. And you went to
Well,
meet the devil.
the
And you say, and
outdoors
the
people.
devils are alive. There are devils.
Yeah, there are the little Tasmanian devil is alive, but he's almost extinct because he has a cancer on his mouth that he can't eat. And so they have sanctuaries for them where they're trying to keep them, but they're almost gone. So you're not going to see a Tasmanian devil. You will see lots of the little wallabies and the wombats and the pattamelons. They're all very cute, and they're everywhere. At Cradle Lake in the park, I was having lunch, and there was one really overweight wallaby waiting for me to give him a treat. I mean, they are like very friendly, and there's no big predators that I'm aware of there.
Oh, wow.
So, but the people who come to Tasmania, and they do come from all over the world, are hikers.
Okay. So
Because
that's their
that's
tourism
the
is
big draw
hiking.
is the outdoors.
Nice.
The lovely outdoor. That lighthouse that's behind you was
Mm.
fun. It's a circuitous drive up this mountain up to the top. You don't have a sensation there of how high it is, but it's quite high, overlooking the Tasman. Very dramatic view, and you have a sense of, and it's a huge marine mammal preserve there, like 200 miles out into the Tasman Sea is fishing, and all of that is prohibited. So you have the whales and the seals and the dolphins, and you have a
Oh,
ton of marine life. And when the British first came, the sealers came, and they just about clubbed all the seals to death.
oh.
Just about. But
Mm.
now they have been refurbished. What the sealers also did was abducted Aboriginal women and,
Ew.
yeah, and raped them and impregnated them. So the story goes that the last Aboriginal woman, Aboriginal, full-blooded Aboriginal. Her name was True Janini, and she was born in 1803. And by 1876, there were no more Aboriginals. It was a genocide, a total genocide. They had
No.
killed out all of the Aboriginals. All right, and there were 4,000 of them when the British arrived. But one thing that you may not know is that there was a Frenchman, I think his name was Perron, who got there before the French or before the British, and they didn't colonize. This man was an artist, and he drew pictures
Oh,
of the Aboriginal people and their dwellings. So it's very interesting to see his drawings. There's a
oh,
documentary on YouTube that I watched. I didn't. It's a little controversial because it talks about the fact that there are they say there are Aboriginal people on Tasmania who are half caste from the sealers and the British who raped the Aboriginal
yeah.
women. And they have a
Wow.
village. They have a little village still on Tasmania. So they dispute the idea that there are no Aboriginal people on the island. But the fact is that most people say that it was a total genocide. What happened was when those landed gentry came, they
Mm.
brought sheep. So the sheep then took over the hunting grounds of the Aboriginals. And so then the Aboriginal people became aggressive and started killing the settlers. So when
Oh,
that happened, it's just kind of like our story. Doesn't it sound kind of like
yeah.
our story?
It's history is,
You
people
know,
are,
I mean, it's
yeah.
kind of, the people came out, killed all the buffalo and took over all the hunting grounds. And the Indians responded by fighting. They didn't have any choice because they
Mm.
were being displaced. Same thing here, only they did a better job of killing everyone in Tasmania.
It's, it's crazy when you go to places like that and you hear that history. And on an island, it just feels closer because an island's
Right.
smaller. And when you're walking through it, I remember when we were in Guernsey, in the Channel Islands in between England and France, and there was all this World War II history because the Nazis occupied the island. And so when you're walking, you knew these people were there, and you were on these, you were just in their footsteps because you couldn't escape the footsteps because it's a tiny little place. We didn't belong there. We were too loud. We needed a small for us. But I mean, we went to even just a hospital, and it was an underground hospital. And yeah, I got the creeps, man. 100%. Nancy and I were just like, because there was still water dripping down the walls and moss on the inside, and the original beds from when the Nazis took over were there. It was freaky.
Right.
But when you're in a place like that, you're walking where someone ancient was. Do you feel that when you hike? Do you think about the people before you when you
Yes.
hike?
Yes, I do. Particularly around here, the Tongva people lived
Mhm,
in the mountains here, and yeah, I feel a layered spirituality in the
mm,
mountains. The original peoples, and then here we have a lot of very um, earthing types.
mhm.
People are out there earthing around here. I feel as like I say, a layered sense of spirituality as I go
Mm,
through the woods and
mm,
my walks.
mm.
Now here, I didn't go to Port Arthur, which is the most famous place because that's where the penal colony is, right? But I kind of didn't want to go there. I had read about how beastly and horrible it was and how they treated
Yeah.
people and so on, and it was slave labor to build it. The convicts were slaves.
You mean
And
like our White House?
yeah,
Oopsie.
exactly. Right. And even though Port Arthur is supposed to be quite a charming place, I had limited time and I didn't go there. Instead, I hiked this track that you see behind me, which was what I wanted to do.
Oh yeah, that's the nature. And that's the thing. I mean, to be able to see, when you hike in nature, you see the similarities between countries and places, but also these incredible differences. But do you feel like when you think about how everything's split, like how Tasmania, shot off on this side and here's Australia, right? And you can see like, okay, this used to be here. You know what I mean?
You
They're
think
like,
about the geography of our planet,
yeah.
it brings it home.
Hmm.
One thing, but I kind of wanted to go to Port Arthur because there's an island, I think it's called Burney Island, but there's a ferry that goes out to this island, which is supposed to be really cool.
Oh.
I have a friend who's Australian. She told me, be sure and do that. Well, didn't quite, you
So
can't
in
do
other words, you
everything.
want to go
Didn't
back. Am
make
I hearing
everything,
this? Am I
that's another
hearing
thing.
a
When I
return
travel,
visit?
I'm sorry.
Return?
When I
I said,
travel, I don't try to do everything. I try to have
mm,
a good time.
yeah.
So I don't rush around trying to see every top site. I
Yeah.
try to immerse myself in the place and maybe a little local thing. Like when I was coming home from this place, I saw a street sign that said Boomer Bay. I went, Boomer Bay? I'm a boomer. I have to go to Boomer Bay. So I turn off the main highway and I tootle down Boomer Bay. And I see, and there wasn't any place for me to eat. I was hungry. I was looking for a place to eat. And I saw a driveway and a sign that said something about something lodge. And I went, okay, I'll check it out. So I go up, and it is so darling. It's a Victorian house, and it's set in a lavender garden, and they have a herb garden and
Oh,
flowers and butterflies, and it's just my car and maybe one other car. And I go up to and it indicates that there is a restaurant there. So I go up and knock on the door, and it's like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, which is a weird time to be wanting to have lunch or dinner. So I said, well, I know it's an off time, but, and there was no one in the dining hall, which was
okay.
very nice. It was overlooking the sea. There was a
Oh,
sea
wow.
breeze coming in, the yellow curtains were lifting lightly in a sea breeze. And the tables were set like an English cafe, a little English
Oh,
Victorian style thing. And I said, I wonder if I could, get something to eat. So the gentleman was very nice, once again, very extending. He said, "Oh, all right. Well, we have a seafood special today." And I went, "Really?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, I happen to love seafood. Bring it on." So I'm sitting there having tea,
of
and
course.
with the cloth napkins. I mean, it was very nice, not hoity-toity nice, but comfortable, sweet, inviting
Mm,
nice. And he brought out some fresh homemade bread, a whole platter of all different kinds of seafood, clams and mussels and
wow.
shrimps, and all of this with these different dips and things. They're the big seafood here. And it was absolutely fabulous. It was the best meal
Wow.
I had in all of Australia.
Wow. Wow. But that, I love that you leave room for spontaneity and talk about not
Right.
going too fast. You need
That's
to
the
leave that room.
deal. That's the deal. When you're rushing around to see the sights, I think you miss a great deal, and it's just not the way I want to travel. So
Mm,
that's why I always take I try when I have a trip to take a week and travel independently. Because
mm,
usually, like in Australia, I was hosted, like I said, by Overseas Adventure Travel, which is a wonderful trip, but it's 21 days, and you're zooming around to the major sites. It starts in
mm,
Melbourne, you go to the outback, Uluru, you go, and we ended up in the Daintree area. I mean, it was all wonderful, but you're going at a pretty fast clip,
mm, mm. Well, I think it sounds like you leave room to go back too, and that's the thing. Nancy and I always find ourselves circling back to places because it's like we never did this, and people are always like, it's like when you go to a place and it happens to us all the time. Well, why didn't you come see us? Well, like you can't see all the people you know in a place either when you're traveling, which seems
right?
really rude to people, but we
You
can't.
can't,
You and it's like
you
you
can't,
want to,
yeah,
you just can't do everything. You can't see everyone, but you do a little bit. But it's better to have that immersive experience where you actually can feel and actually breathe in and enjoy it and have a
right.
memory because when you're zooming so fast, your memories, that's when it becomes
Well,
that
you
big
get
blur.
well,
And what's the
well, you
point?
get you get tired instead of refreshed.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
get exhausted
And your
instead of,
memory goes with it too.
yeah,
That's what I think. The memory, just saying, getting to that point of learning, okay, this is what's not going to make the memory bank.
right. Well, I was really fortunate to be staying with some local people. A woman I
Mm,
know who is an author. Her sister lived there, and they had never, sight unseen, they had never met me, and they were so
oh,
gracious,
wow.
and so extending, and made my trip quite special. So no, I didn't meet any international folks, but I met quite a few locals,
Mm,
and all of them were really nice. And the Airbnbs, like I told you, sweet, clean, lovely environments, all of them reasonable and good. And I would highly recommend, and if you're traveling in Tasmania, to do the Airbnb thing,
Mm,
because you will meet the locals and have a really nice local experience. Um, my Wombat Lodge, I will say this, was a little bit too far away from the entrance to the park. And Cradle
mm,
Mountain is quite up there, and it's quite, there are very few places to stay. And I think it was the Lemongrass Inn that was close to the entrance of the park that I really wished I'd stayed at, because then I could have spent more time in the
mm,
park. And also, there were trails coming out of that
mm,
resort. So it was a little pricey, and I didn't do it. And I wished I'd spent the extra bucks to be
mm,
closer. There's also lodging inside the park, which, I
mm.
chinced out on that when I should not have done that.
Sounds like you need to go back. I was trying to say that
I
earlier.
wouldn't
It's like it
mind.
sounds.
I wouldn't mind. Actually, Australia,
Mm,
there's tons of stuff to see. I would go to the Blue Mountains, which I didn't get to when I was there. And Brisbane, I understand, is very nice. I really didn't do a lot of. I wanted to go to Whitsunday Island and the Gold Coast and some of those really gorgeous turquoise waters. And the water is warm enough to swim there. Uh,
mm,
I swam there. And the wonderful thing, I love the Sydney Harbor. You take the little ferries, you can go to the different stops, get on and off. And in Manly, I went swimming at the beach there, and the water was quite warm as Hawaii, clean,
mm.
really, really nice. But I wouldn't recommend swimming in Tasmania, I don't think. I walked on the beaches and put my toe in, but and I swim
Yeah.
here in the Pacific. So I'm not exactly a wimp on that front.
Well, to me, it sounds like South Africa in a way, to me, a little bit of like Cape Town, kind of the Cape area. And there's a certain, it's just even the ruggedness of the cliffs. There's certain, like the Garden Route area, like Mossel Bay, Plettenberg Bay,
Mm.
that kind of area. It reminds me of what, just from your story. And for some reason, I am now craving a good cup of rooibos tea and a scone. I want a scone.
I had that, yeah. I
Uh,
had a toast, what they call a toasty, which is kind of toasty and tea, which is kind of like a panini thing, only with, toast. And, it was all really nice.
Did you
Um,
have Vegemite?
no, I actually, I haven't actually had the pleasure. I understand it's acquired taste. Um, I'd like to go to South Africa, where you
I,
are from. I would
yeah,
like to go there, and I think we're going to be talking about Africa on our next episode.
I hope
And I
so.
believe I believe that's where we're going next. But
Sounds good to me.
I was in Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Zambia.
Mm,
Is where I
awesome.
was, and I
Awesome.
loved Africa, and I would love to go back. But
Mm.
we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, it's always changing on that continent.
Well, and
Always.
me. I mean, I hope I can make it back personally.
It's a
I'm
that's
sure
a
sure
it's
it's
a rough
still
drive.
there.
I said it's a rough drive. It's a long flight, I should say. It's a
Yeah,
long flight from what I've
20-hour
seen.
flight from here. I mean, that's that's a thing. That's a thing.
You want first
Australia's
class and champagne.
Yeah, Australia is like 14 hours from me.
Mm,
If I go back, I will want to stay a month and really take a there's just so much to see, really, and
mhm.
it's all beautiful, but you want to go in our winter because
Yes.
there's summer.
Always get out in the winter and go to the summer places. It sounds like the perfect way to do things as far as I'm concerned. Well, Linda,
Right.
it's always a pleasure to go on an adventure with you. And Linda is a lost angel because she is based out of the city of Angels, Los Angeles, and she loves to get out in nature, as you hear, and seek out the outdoors versus learning about the slave trade, which is hard well, it's hard.
Well,
To
the
know
history is
history is hard.
interesting.
It is, but it is interesting and it is important to know our history. But it is when you travel, you have to make those decisions, and it's um, and sometimes a trip like that is the only trip someone will take, for years. So it's important to do what you really care about, but leave that open window of spontaneity. I always say that you've got to be able to. That's why we don't drive a big rig of RV, a massive RV, because we'd be dead by now because it's like that road looks so cool. Let's go. You need to be able to have that. But everyone, I encourage you to go to Linda's website and get her books. This one, this story about Tasmania, The Devil Made Me Do It, that is in her book, The Lost Angel Unleashed, Stories from the Heart. And that is her third Lost Angel book. So all three books, you can go to lostangeladventures.com. And for all of her books, her nonfiction and fiction, go to lindaballauthor.com. Looking forward to our next chat, Linda.
All right, Lisa, take care of yourself out there in the world, okay?
You too. Enjoy that sunshine. I know you're going to Arizona next, right? So we'll have to
Yes,
catch up
yes,
after that.
I'm looking forward. I know the wildflowers are going to be outrageous because of all the big rain we've had. It'll be great.
And snow.
Yeah. Well,
And
by March it should be all over. I think it'll just
yeah,
be
oh, it
gorgeous.
will be. Trust me. I've got a big foot and I'm just got a big boot on there, big hiking boot, and any more snow, I'm kicking it back. Good luck on that. All right.
All
You
right,
take care,
Lisa.
Linda.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's Lost Angel Travel Adventure Show with Linda Ballou, travel writer and author. Keep up with her at lindaballauthor.com and lostangeladventures.com. You can also keep up with Big Blend Radio at bigblendradio.com. Now, happy traveling.